Hello, believers, and welcome along. This is a podcast all about creative people and how they think, and also a little bit about the X-Files. Getting more X-Files content by the week, I have to say. Someone wrote in to ask if I ever made it to the ruined Temple of Decision, where I was off the other day. I didn't, sadly. Sorry to burst any bubbles there. I had to turn back. Otherwise, I would have ended up in a kind of stranded Blair Witch type situation, and nobody wants that. I'm currently stood in Modern Art Gallery 2 in Edinburgh. Lots to enjoy here. The main exhibition's actually being changed at the minute. It's in a state of flux, but I find myself stood between two self-portraits. One is of Cindy Sherman, looking a lot like Dolly Parton, I have to say. And the other is Sarah Lucas with a big fish. In one of the other rooms, actually, there's like a little mini tornado. So that's pretty cool. I didn't get a chance to ask her if she liked Cindy Sherman or Sarah Lucas, but today's guest is a massive fan of the surreal and of the kitsch. It's Canadian performer, cabaret host, an all-round trash enthusiast, Trixie Malicious. Trixie has been a mainstay of the cabaret scene internationally, as well as in London, where she worked out of Bethnal Green Working Men's club. And she's a mastermind and MC of club nights like SLEAZE. It's a great chat, this, and I really struggled to pick a clip from it because there's loads of great bits in this conversation. Trixie talks about growing up uncensored, Canadian public access TV, bad taste versus good taste, burlesque, performance, and of course we get on to chatting about season 1 episode 11 of the X-Files, entitled Eve. I hope you get as many film and TV recommendations from this chat as I did. As always, if you like the show, please do like and subscribe and drop us a line at believemepod@gmail.com. I'll bid a fond farewell to Cindy Sherman and Sarah Lucas and her fish, and carry on around this art gallery and introduce you to Trixie for a very fun chat.
If this podcast is like centered on creativity, I'd say I'm definitely in a chrysalis right now.
Right. Okay.
I'm definitely in a chrysalis period. And I don't know, I was excited. You were saying that you wanted to talk about like influences and stuff, and
yeah.
I'm excited to talk about that because I feel like when you're in a chrysalis, you go back to that.
Yes. So in terms of being in a chrysalis, are you just absorbing influences at the minute and you're working towards a project, or you're just seeing what happens?
Well, it's so funny because I don't really know what I am. I never have. I guess my creative career, I've definitely had a creative career that has been my main source of income for many years, but I'm not quite sure what it is. I feel like it was, and also I was never at any point like, oh, I want to be a performer. I want to be this type of performer. I want to be a stand-up comedian. It's all just like I fell in. Everything I did, I just sort of fell into it by just sort of following gut instincts and just following opportunities that arose. So I guess my whole creative career has just been quite sort of luck-driven and haphazard. So
yeah.
Even back when I first started performing and started producing club nights and stuff, it all just was like, oh, I could do this. Oh, I could do this. Oh, this person needs this. Oh, I'll jump in. And so it was all, I'd say, a little bit unplanned and uncalculated. So now I'm like, oh, nothing's haphazard anymore. There's not the chance for things to be haphazard. Nothing's going to be I'm not going to fall into something anymore when I have to get a babysitter and deliberately decide when I go out. So it's I've actually got to really have a think about what my next what my next what my next move is if I want to do something. So if I wanted to produce another club night, or if I wanted to do a podcast, or if I wanted to do something, I do feel like I need some sort of creative vent, because right now I'm just
Yeah.
throwing throwing my creative endeavors into, like, I don't know, making overly elaborate advent calendars for my son and stuff, to
Well,
the
yeah.
point where you're like, this is a bit much. Is this therapy or a craft?
Yeah, I hear you on that, and I know I mean, that was one of the reasons for starting this podcast, actually, and sort of, one, trying to avoid a midlife crisis of my own, and seeing how other people do it or aren't doing it or are navigating, a day to day. And it's interesting that you said, like, coming off the back of the pandemic and how that sort of changed everyone's look on life, and how they approach things on their own sort of practice in a way. But when you grew up, were you surrounded by performers, or how did you first get to a point where you thought, oh, that's interesting, I could do something like that?
Yeah, well, definitely I was surrounded. So my mother is a writer,
Hmm.
and so she always made her living writing. So she did a regular column in the local paper, and then it was syndicated to a few other papers. So she was like a weekly columnist, and
Right.
it was really like unfettered. Like, she could just write about whatever she wanted. It was
Wow.
just sort of a slice of life, I guess. Not, I wouldn't even say opinion. Like, she was literally allowed to write whatever she wanted. I'd imagine those days are over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my mum was always writing, and my father, he worked at the local TV cable channel, which again
Right.
doesn't exist anymore. And so he was always making cable and filming and producing cable TV access shows.
Well, I mean, this has just really put into relief you.
Yeah, I know. I
That's
know.
fantastic. Yeah.
I really grew up against a Tim and Eric backdrop, um, which is why when I first saw Tim and Eric, I was like, well, this is just so comforting. It's like my
Yes.
childhood. And then his hobby was, so my grandfather was an actor in his spare time,
Right.
who did a lot of theater. And he did like Shakespeare and stuff, and he always was really into, like, he was always in plays, and I think he was in some professional productions, but he also always did amateur theater.
Right.
And his claim to fame, which we were so proud of when we were children, is he was in a TV commercial with a Vincent Price
Oh shit.
as a butler of a haunted house in it was a TV commercial for, in Canada there's this real estate company called Century 21, and it was
Right.
like Vincent Price was house hunting for a new haunted house, and my grandfather was like the haunted butler showing him around a house, and so that was obviously the thrill of a lifetime.
Well, I mean, that must be online somewhere, is it? Someone must have found that in the recesses of the internet.
I hope so. I'm going to try to find it. My aunt might have it, because my aunt is kind of a natural archivist, is it? So
Yeah.
she might have it. But yeah, but we were always going to his theater productions as children, as early as I can remember. And then my dad, he handed that love of theater down to my dad. So my dad always did community theater
Hmm.
aside from working at the, local cable channel. So I just remember being a kid and just being like, well, that's what you do with your spare time.
Yes.
Like, when you
Right.
have spare time and you're not working, you have to be in some sort of creative production. That's just what grown-ups do.
Yeah.
And we used to have, me and my sisters used to literally have sleepovers. We used to bring our sleeping bags and sleep over on the sets when my dad was doing like community theater. We used to
Really?
like to have sleepovers on the sets and stuff. He did stuff like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and he did On Golden Pond, and
My God.
all these different like amateur productions, and then all of the people who were in those productions were like always over at our house for dinner parties and stuff. So I
Yeah.
feel like I just always, as I grew up, I was like, well, I better do some sort of play or production or club night or project in my spare time. Otherwise, Otherwise, what am I doing?
Yeah, that's so funny. And so, at what point did you start kind of going out then and seeing, more of the sort of style of performance that you're sort of known for now? Was it sort of 16, 17 you started going out and seeing that?
Actually, I remember back when we were flatmates, you were telling me that I loved this story. You're telling me that when you were a kid, you would watch The Terminator, and your dad he had edited out all the swear words or something, or all the sex scenes.
And the sex scene, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was like eager to ask you whether you now allow your children to have like unmitigated access to things, or whether you would edit like your dad did, because I feel like a huge part of like who I became as a creative was to do with unmitigated access.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I mean, to a point. And off the back of that, Chris Cunningham, the filmmaker who did all the videos for Aphex Twin, I always remember an interview with him where he said he would make these really like Goyer-esque pictures as a child of like people having their heads chopped off, being chainsawed to death, and his mum and dad would really encourage it, going, it's brilliant, you put loads of like...
He wasn't just instantly medicated, no. So that's nice.
So it's like, you could have a bit more of a vein coming out of the neck on that. Go on, Chris. Keep on. And I think there's something to that, I think there's like, within reason, because the other week, it's funny you bring up that Terminator story, because I would probably try, and I try not to kind of curate their tastes, because it's just, I don't want too mini-me's, because that is just narcissism gone mad. But we did sit down to watch Little Shop of Horrors, and I thought, they'll like this, and Lenny does find musicals quite cringy and sort of can't look at me when that's happening. But I thought, you'll like this. And he engaged with the plant, but I totally forgot about Steve Martin being the dentist.
Oh,
and
yes,
really had a profound effect.
That's really scary. I remember that part the most from when I was a kid, like the sadistic dentist. Like, and it's really hard because you don't know what is going to seep in and disturb them, because it's quite random. Because I remember as a kid, so like I said, I had unfettered access to every cable, like my dad worked for the cable company.
Right.
So we had every single channel, which was quite rare back then. And I used to just sneak up in the middle of the night and go downstairs and watch Super Channel for hours in the evening. And when my parents thought I was in bed, and I used to just watch so much Super Channel, and Super Channel was, it was, I don't know what it's the equivalent of, maybe like late night HBO-esque, but it would have all the weird stuff and all the movies.
It sounds like late night Channel 4 in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah. And there was so much stuff on there that I loved. And you know how children how it's very common for children to like repetition, like when they like a video, they'll watch it literally over and over and over again,
right?
Until they cast it aside and move to the next one. There was certain things on Super Channel, and I think the way it would work is they would buy the license to a movie for like a month, or they'd buy a license to something, so they would have something on over and over and over for like a month or two, and then the next month it would all sort of switch up. I guess it was to do with they were buying the showing rights of whatnot. Right. So it really like jived with the child, because that's what you like to do, is just watch something ad nauseum.
Yeah.
So I just watched all of the Russ Myers movies.
Right.
So I was always upset, and there's some really upsetting stuff in Russ Myers movies. Yeah. Like there is a horrible one where of a girl getting strangled in a bathtub, because everything, when you think of Russ Myers, you think of them like, big boobs running through the desert having a great time, but actually there's some really upsetting things in there.
Yeah. And
then I just remember watching like The Lost Boys over and over.
Wow.
And there was some really random things on there, like I watched the Bad News Bears. Have you ever
I
seen
don't
that?
think we got that over here. What's that then?
Okay, so it's Walter Matthau.
Right.
And it's a 70s movie. And it's really, I mean, I haven't watched it since I was young, but I'd love to give it a rewatch. Maybe we should get together and have a Bad News Bears movie night one time.
Yes.
But it's basically like your classic American baseball movie. I think it's baseball, where it's the ragtag team of
Oh,
losers
yeah.
who gets the coach who turns things around. But this movie is like the coach. I don't know why he turns things around because he's an alcoholic.
Right.
I can't remember for sure, but I believe he like strikes them, like he's
Oh,
abusive.
good old bit of
It's
corporal
all this
punishment.
crazy 70s stuff where you're like, um, this is insane. But anyways, I just used to watch the most random stuff. Like I used to watch the Bad News Bears all the time. There was this movie about summer camp with children making a bet of who could lose their virginity called Little Darlings, and I used to watch that
I'm
all the
writing all
time.
these down. These sound just awesome.
Yeah, and I was my favorite movie maybe to this day is I absolutely loved Lady and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains, and there was a lot of also just like really poor quality B movies that would come on
Yeah.
at like 3 in the morning, but I feel like watching all of that made me developed in me like the bad taste as good taste
Yeah. Right. Right.
vein in my enjoyment. Like I love things where like it's so bad it's good. And like the cable access stuff and these movies where I think actually being a kid and watching stuff that's terrible, it's kind of good because it teaches kids, oh, like why is this film terrible? Why is
Yeah.
this terrible? Like if you only watch things that are high quality, then are you really analyzing why they're high quality and why they're successful? And I think I really developed humor of loving things that were unsuccessful.
Yeah. You definitely, and also a kind of, this is a really terrible phrase, but being a kind of omnivore in terms of highbrow and lowbrow culture, and like not even really, it's just if you find something to engage in a film or art or something like that, then that's fine, and you don't need to explain yourself.
Yeah, I like the term omnivore. That's a good description because yeah, I do obviously I love high quality things, but I also love terrible quality things. I
Yeah.
remember me and my friend when we were kids, we used to love to watch Danielle Steele movies and just rip them to shreds, and like,
Oh
and I
yes.
feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of good for kids to rip on things, kind of like to, kind of like
I mean, I kind of associate you with like John Waters quite a lot. That's because you were one of the first people who really started talking to me about him and his work, and and I at the time I don't think I'd seen Pink Flamingos, so that sort of opened up. When you see that film for the first time, it's totally mind blowing. Like a beam down from another planet.
I mean, Pink Flamingos is another one that. So when I was a really little kid, we had some really lovely neighbors that used to take care of me. I don't, you know what? I don't, I wonder to this day if they did it for free. Like, I don't even know if like, it was a very
Right.
unofficial daycare situation. But I used to go to their house and they were janitors. And they were janitors who worked all night and then rested in the day. So I would hang out at their
Right.
house, and sometimes they'd be resting or napping. And again, they would just put the TV on and I was allowed to watch whatever came on. And they were specifically janitors of an arcade. They did the mall and the arcade. So they had
Right.
arcade machines in their house. And one
Oh
of them
wow.
was strip poker. And they had a penny on a string that went through so you could play the game as much as you want. I used to
Continually, yeah.
remember going to their house and watching Pink Flamingos and playing strip poker, and
Wow.
I was like 5.
What a childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, they chain smoked. And nobody knew it was bad back then, or maybe they did, but I just used to Like, I wonder
Yeah.
if I'll get lung cancer later despite being a non-smoker.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a case against any forms of censorship, isn't it? So, let's just. I hope you listen to this BBFC because this is we've both turned out very rounded individuals. So,
Yes. I mean, but then when it comes to my son, I'm like, do I just let him just have watch whatever he wants? And
yeah, do you? I mean, I guess because things like YouTube and phone people with phones are just so ubiquitous at the minute. Is it? Do you find like sitting there to watch a film almost kind of quaint in a way? Is it? Is it like a
rustic?
It's like,
Let's
isn't this
just put on our
nice?
bonnets and sit down and bake some bread and put on our bonnets and watch a rustic film around
Yeah,
the TV.
watch Necromantic or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the TV seems wholesome now. I remember like when we were kids, there was, everyone worrying about TV consumption and it making children violent was the worry about video games and stuff. But
Yeah.
now I'm like, oh, TV seems healthy compared to like the phone in their face. I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like it's different because I do feel like it's slightly different because when I was down in the basement watching Super Channel, those were films that just whether they were good or bad, they were a product and someone's vision and a
Yeah.
story that someone made. Whereas the thing I worry about YouTube is like the awareness that children are there and they're trying to fill their head with some opinion or view or lean them one way or the other, like sort of.
Right.
Whereas, like, no, like Russ Myers wasn't trying to influence anyone with his films. He was just making his film, and they were just making a product, and who saw it. Whereas, like,
Yeah.
it's the commentary videos or the opinion videos on YouTube where they're sort of actively entreating people.
Yeah, I guess there's also a kind of monetization of YouTube, which you didn't have with cable, or it's a line between, say, Russ Meyer or John Waters. They've obviously got to clear their overheads, but it's like this is the vision, and if you want to get on board with it, great. If you don't, then this is still my outpouring as an artist. And I'm sure people who use YouTube a lot and YouTube creators. I mean, I know there are creative YouTube creators out there, but there's also, a lot, sort of 70% of the stuff on YouTube is just to keep you on YouTube, just to keep you on there. In the same way it is on Netflix, on, any sort of streaming service. Like, don't go anywhere and we're going to start selling you stuff. But maybe, again, that's like the TV tried to sell you stuff, but maybe it's like rose-tinted glasses with the whole thing.
And I mean, I'm trying not to be overly negative about the internet stuff because I'm trying to remember that, yeah, when we were kids, everyone was really, really anti-TV and it turned out fine. So now everyone's really, really anti-tablet and anti-letting them go off on YouTube. And I understand why the worry, but I'm also like, it'll probably turn out fine as well. And also, there's a lot of people on YouTube who I feel like are kind of a good influence for like I remember my friend was really concerned about her teen daughter because her teen daughter was just constantly on YouTube watching commentators, like commentary videos. But then there's like Cody Ko and Curtis Connor and Jarvis Johnson and all of those YouTubers. They are coming from a good place of like they are watching things that are negative and analyzing and making fun of them for being negative. So if your teen is watching them, it's almost like maybe a mini lesson in critical thinking in a way.
Yeah,
so I'm
that's
trying to tell myself, don't fear it too much. It'll probably be fine.
So at what point did you, when did you come to the UK then?
I think, sorry, I'm apologize because I think you asked me about my creative career and then I just went on this big tangent about TV.
Yeah.
I'm very bad for going on tangents. So I was really obsessed and taste driven, if you will. So I remember I used to subscribe to this thing called Spearmint Rhino that would send you videos.
All right. What, like the strip club Spearmint Rhino? Is it?
Oh no, Peppermint Rhino. Oh, sorry, that is the strip club. Peppermint Rhino. pink rhino. It was called something or other. It wasn't anything to do with the strip club,
Right.
but it was called something random. It might have been peppermint rhino or something. Anyways, you paid. I literally found the ad in like a back of a comic or the back of a cassette cover or something. You paid for a year's subscription, and then they would send you something once a month from like a warehouse in Los Angeles. So they sent me all the Betty Page movies.
Oh, right.
And they also, the other thing I loved was Science Mystery Theater 3000. I
Yes,
loved watching that.
Right.
So Science Mystery Theater 3000 got me into the actual like exploitation 50s movies that they were watching. So the Peppermint Rhino or whatever it's called. Oh God, maybe someone out there remembers what it was called. I got lots of videos from them, and they were obviously on VHS. So I watched a lot of Betty Page, and like sort of old like burlesque, and also I knew of Tura Satana from the Russ Myers movies. Then I moved to Vancouver and I went to university, and then I just kind of was in the right place at the right time, because there was a lot of bands in Vancouver at the time that were like, it'd be cool to have like a dancer or a performer doing stuff with our band. So I was just like, well, I watch all these sort of old burlesque movies. I'll just kind of do that on stage with them. So I just started dancing with bands, literally just sort of making it up from the videos, doing some sort of go-go burlesque type exploitation dancing with these bands. And it was literally just to have fun, because we just would tour, we'd go to different cities, we'd party, it was just a really fun time doing that in my sort of early 20s. And that would have been around 1998, 2000, 2001. And then, so I just sort of happened to be in the right place at the right time when there was a burlesque revival. So I was just like, oh, this burlesque group started up in Vancouver, and I was like already kind of making up my own vaguely burlesque thing by like sort of dancing with these bands. So I was like, they're doing little stories, like they're doing little performance stories with this type of dancing. I was like, that's right up my alley. So I started doing burlesque and started making good money from it. And I was like, wow. And then I graduated from university, and I was like, well, I'm not quite sure what to do after university. I did a creative writing degree, so I don't know if there's some sort of corporation you can join as a creative writer. So I moved over to London, and I'd never been to the UK before, but my father was born in London, so I always had dual citizenship. And then I just sort of arrived, and it was just a matter of right time at the right place thing. I just really feel like I lucked out, because there was only a handful of people doing burlesque at that time. And I just sort of looked at Time Out, saw that all of what was going on at the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club. Sort of literally went there, knocked on the door, and was like, hello, I'd like to work here, please. And they were like, okay. It was sort of like oddly easy. And I bartended there, I did burlesque there, and then I ended up working there, for years, and then that's kind of how I made all my friendships. So so the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club was such a special place for me, because to this day, most of my best friends I met through working at that club, and we all it was almost like there was a stable of creatives there who all did random things, and we'd all just come together in we'd just all come together in like various lineups for each other's things. So it's like, oh, I'm DJing this one I'm burlesque dancing, this one I'm going to help organize, this one we're going to do this, and just sort of I just had like a really good time for like 10 years.
It was so like every time I went there for a club night, it was so kind of infectious, the fact that you were all having so much fun and had put so much effort into each other's shows and your own shows, and it just felt like a great time, like you'd stumbled upon you'd gone back into, it was sort of like timeless, you'd gone back in time, but also you were in this sort of netherworld. It felt really exciting, actually. I mean, but I've not been for a while, so I mean, I was going to ask you what the sort of What's the state of the burlesque scene at the minute? And have you noticed anything change?
But I think I was in an earlier generation than what's happening
Yeah.
now. And the thing about me is, when I grew up, I was always like, I would classify myself as a punk,
Yeah.
so I was always going to punk gigs and very into like sort of outraged atheism
Yeah.
and anti thought police and all
Yeah.
this, and very much grew up as a punk kid, which I still to this day maintain that if you're from a low income family, get into punk. It'll really help.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't need to have cool clothes or anything, and you get to despise the system that made
Yeah.
you low income. So it's really healthy. I think punk is really healthy, particularly for low income kids. So I sort of grew up in a really like punk vein, and then also developing this sort of good taste, bad taste thing.
Mm.
And so burlesque at that time was so DIY, which is what I loved. It was like you made your own costume, you made your own props. If those props looked kind of shitty, all the more hilarious,
Yes. Right.
And so when I came to the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club, I was like, wow, I have met my people.
Mm.
Like there was so many other people there who were just had that exact same taste that I did, that was like, let's kind of make things look funny and crappy. Like let's have purposely low budget props and stuff. Whereas I feel I don't know much about the scene now because I kind of moved on from it because I sort of felt like I'd done what I could in burlesque
Sure.
and wanted to move on to other things like years ago. But as far as I can see, like I think things are kind of slick now.
Right. Okay.
I don't know. I think things got like I'm sure there's every different type of I think it's bigger now.
Mm.
And so I think that every type of performance scene probably exists. But when I got out of it, I felt like, oh, people are putting real money into their costumes. Like people are putting
Right.
like Swarovski crystals on their
Right.
costumes, and I literally used like glue stick and dollar store glitter. And I was with like drag queens who would make like as a joke make like my friend Rosella used to make an outfit out of a cabbage like he'd get from Tesco each time, and like people who would make
Yeah.
like glitter Tesco bags and make an outfit. So we liked that really like low rent glamour aesthetic, like people with like
Yeah.
knotted wigs and stuff, and like I always loved that part of it, and that felt really John Waters and chaotic. And there was definitely like when I got out of it, I was like I would be booked sometimes on a lineup where I'd be like doing some sort of have some sort of like homemade prop, and there'd be the next person on would be like in like a corset covered in Swarovski crystals, and they just look like this
Right.
amazing
Yeah.
ethereal goddess, and I'd be like, "Oh, this is this is kind of not my vein here."
Yeah. That's like because that's what I used to love about the scene you're talking about is there was so much effort went into each night's each of the outfits, but also just for that night. And you might never
Yeah.
use it again. But it was like
Yes.
brilliant, the amount of like, oh, really excited, go down there. Like, what have you come up with this time? And it's like, yeah, like you say, it's someone on stage covered in cabbage.
Oh, and everything found for like under 5 quid, like
Yeah,
really like, because we had a quick turnover. We never really did the same, we often didn't do the same thing twice. So it felt almost like a game show challenge. Like, what can you come up with in one week on
yeah,
this budget for this? And I'm sure I mean, I don't want to, like, I definitely don't want to say anything negative about the scene now because they might still have that vein. I just don't know.
yeah.
I just know that when I sort of, I mean, I got bored of it after a while because I'd been doing it for a long time, and I also was getting very tired of the very late nights. Um,
Right.
Getting home at like 4 a.m. I sort of wanted a less nocturnal structure. So I started doing my own club night sleaze, and I started doing I just started doing mainly doing sleaze in my own club night when I stopped doing burlesque as much, because I just felt
Mm.
like I'd rather curate a show than be in it at this point.
Yeah.
And actually, when I think back, when I think back to all my influences, the people who I would say are my triad of influences the most is Pee Wee Herman, Elvira, and Dolly Parton.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Pee Wee Herman and Elvira, they were kind of like the curators of madness. Like
Yeah.
Pee Wee Herman was like, he was there almost as like the host of his playhouse. Like he was the protagonist, but he was kind of like this is my house and look at all the crazy characters in it. And Elvira was bookending like a B movie. And
Yeah.
I was like, I kind of see myself as that type of performer. Like I don't want to be a burlesque performer anymore. I feel done with that, and I don't necessarily like want to be um like a solo performer. I want to like curate. Like I think that's when I moved on to SLEAZE, because I was like I want to curate like a sort of a house of madness,
Yeah.
which is what I loved about Elvira and Pee Wee Herman. It's like they kind of presented to you a crazy, chaotic, hilarious world, and then they sort of would bookend it.
Yeah. And people, I guess that's you. That's the sort of point you're at now, where people go, "Oh, it's Trixie Malicious's stamp of madness," and if she says it's good or she says it's totally out there, then yeah, I'm going to go and watch that.
Well, I think with SLEAZE, it's like I would just. I used to present. I don't know. Did you ever go to one, Chris? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah,
No,
because
I
I
don't
think
so.
you'd maybe already moved up north, but it was kind of like a game show, I guess, more as much as it was a cabaret, it was kind of like a game show. So it'd be like, okay, we start off with some go-go dancers, and then I present performances that I like. So we would have like drag queen performances or burlesque or just very random, strange things, maybe a musical act. And
Yeah.
then punctuated between each performance would be a game show game, and just made very strange game show games. And then there'd be an intermission, the second half, and then it would just end as like a disco. It'd end as like a club night with a DJ playing, my friend Phil playing really amazing music, and my friend
Yeah.
Simon playing really music till the end. So that's kind of how I see my career now, is I don't feel like a burlesque performer or a go-go dancer, even though I did all that for years. I feel like for years I made my money as burlesque, go-go dancing, plus size modeling, and now I just see myself as like a presenter.
Yes. And do you think that's where you talk about you thinking about what the next stage of your processes? Do you think that's where you'd be going with that?
Well, because I've got a 3-year-old. And I'm like and like I had him by myself on purpose. So, I knew that I would be stepping out of the ring for a while. But then I knew eventually, like I said, I was raised that every adult has a creative outlet, and that's what you do. So, and I feel that impulse like deep within me. So I'm like, even if I end up calling bingo at my local working men's club, I want to do that. I want to do something to entertain myself and keep my ideas, just expel them from my mind at some point. So I was thinking of, maybe doing a one-off SLEAZE, or, doing a podcast, or writing some stories. I just want to do something, but I haven't figured out what. But I think my child is getting old enough now that he's a little bit more independent, and it's not, being a mother isn't such a all-encompassing thing as it is. The first 2 years is just like, if I'm eating a hot meal and getting a shower, then it just feels like and he's safe and clean and fed, then it feels like there's no more I can do in a day. But now he's becoming his own little entity, and so I'm like, oh, it's time for me to start formulating what to do next. And it's kind of exciting, and I feel like I can take my time. There's no rush. It's not like there's any time pressure.
Yeah, I mean, now's the time to put him in front of some late night TV and just crack on.
But I think I was saying that you never know what's going to disturb them because it's totally random. Because you can watch something that is a quote unquote horror movie and you don't care. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I would watch horror movies and be unbothered by slashers or serial killers or whatnot. But then I remember we watched some art film, some really artsy film festival film where the two children did what's it called when you make a blood oath when you cut your fingers?
Oh yeah, Blood Brothers.
And they became blood brothers. And I remember like not being able to sleep for weeks and just being deeply disturbed by that, just the whole concept, and just hating it and being really disturbed by that and just getting the ick so much by like, you know, this. And it was supposed to be like a moving scene where they became blood brothers. And I'm me just being like, so disturbed by it. Whereas then I'd watch like a slasher and not care. You never know what's going to get in kids' heads. It's usually quite random. Like I'm sure if you think of what upset you as a kid, it's probably not the most obvious thing, right? I did watch it. I watched my episode. Yes, I watched it this Saturday.
I thought it was a good one for us to talk about, actually. And I'm not trying to be too sort of dictatorial.
Because I murdered my father. So you're like, it really makes me think of her.
Yeah. I mean, I'm making a big assumption that you did watch The X-Files the first time round. But did you?
You know what? I kind of didn't.
Oh, interesting.
I kind of didn't. I'm going to liken it to watermelon because everybody assume like everybody assumes like, oh, it's summer, let's have some watermelon. You must love watermelon. It's kind of pink and kitsch and picnicky. You must love watermelon. And I'm like, I don't like watermelon. I don't know why. And I feel like X-Files is like, everyone's like, surely you would have watched X-Files. And I'm like, I didn't, and I don't know why. When I watched it back, I was like, this should have been my bag, you know?
Sure, and the sort of the fact a lot of it was shot in Canada, so I thought, well, you'll probably turn up at some point.
Like, I was really aware of X-Files, and like I remember the opening credits. I remember them so clearly. You know, when you hear the Twin Peaks song, it's just so familiar. Like, it just reminds me of like childhood. And the X-Files theme song felt like that, so it's obviously was on in my house and stuff, and maybe my parents watched it, I don't know. But I just think it slipped me by, and the only thing I can say is maybe it depends on what time it was on, because I did most of my TV watching like super late at night. And then like in like after school dinner time, I was generally not at home. So I'm wondering if that's why I missed it.
What did you make of it then, watching it back? This is season 1, episode 11, entitled Eve. That we're going to be talking about. So, I mean, what was your first impressions of?
I really enjoyed watching it, and I guess my first impression is it felt really familiar, but I definitely hadn't seen that episode, and I really liked the pacing. Like, it was jam packed. Like, I feel like that plot of that one episode could easily have been stretched into a movie. Like, it was just every single scene, key information was conveyed in every scene. I was impressed by how sort of economical it was. It was like every scene we learn like almost too quickly. Like, it just oh, the girl was kidnapped last night. Okay, now this is happening. Now this is happening. It was so much information that I thought they could have easily like stretched this plot out into a movie if they wanted. Like, it almost felt like it was jam-packed because I was like, we're not getting... Like, they just laissez-faire super quickly. Like, oh, by the way, there was a race of super Adams and Eves created at some point. And you're like, sorry, what? And we're not going to get a flashback? We're not going to get a flashback of a super race being created? Why not? Like, you could have really stretched that out into a whole season if you wanted, of like a super race of Adams and Eves. Like, and they just mentioned it offhand. with no flashback. I just feel like it was refreshing because you see so much where they clearly don't have much content, so they eke it out over an episode.
Yeah.
Whereas this one felt like quite the opposite. It felt very dense. And like I said, every single scene you'd get a huge piece of info. Like if
Yeah.
you missed one scene, you'd be like, "Oh, wait, sorry. There was an IVF doctor who was mixing up eggs for sorry, what?" Like
There's no way you can predict. I mean, this is one of my favourites of this season, because there's no way you can predict where this episode's going. It starts. So there's some runners running along. They see a girl, about 12-year-old girl, on the side pavement, and they say, "Oh, what are you doing out here?" She says, "Oh, my dad, he's sat in the garden." And they go and see the dad. The dad's sat on a swing, and he's got what looks like a vampire attack on his neck, and then that's it. Really cracking open. So you're going, "Oh, right, it's about vampires." And then within the next scene, Mulder's speculating that it's definitely aliens, this. And I love how, like, every episode you get another string to the aliens' bow. It's like, "Oh, yeah, if you get abducted by aliens, there's some red lightning." Right, that's first we've heard about that, Mulder, but thanks for dropping that in. And then, like you say, and then with another scene, it's like, "No, it's actually about evil genetics." You go, wow, I never saw that coming a mile off.
And I feel like I must have missed some bits because I was like, okay, so I mean, everyone was also constantly drinking soda. Like right in the middle, like conveniently, everyone liked a nice big glass of soda all the time.
Yeah.
Like, it made me laugh because they were like, "We've poisoned your soda." Was it Eve 8? They poisoned her soda. And I was like, just in the middle of kidnapping some children, she drank a full soda.
Yeah.
And then also when they go to, when Mulder and Scully have the twins and they go to the rest stop in the night and they're like, "We have to go to the bathroom. Can we pull over?" And then Scully says, "I could use some caffeine." And by that, I mean a fountain diet soda. It's just like, it's very, if I was trying to do a maniacal plan, I just wouldn't have it so contingent on sodas being consumed.
Yes, the digitalis stuff. And I know that because my dad used to take these heart pills and that had got like foxy digitalis stuff in it. So I was like, oh, right, that's such a like unusual thing to come up with. I don't know, maybe you caught this, but and we never really got an answer about why the two men had been exsanguinated.
Yes, there was definitely some plot holes because there was that initial red herring about vampirism just because it did look like two fang marks.
Yeah.
Did they say that those marks on the neck were from a plant?
No.
Were the two fang marks ever explained?
I don't think they were, and I'm glad you didn't pick up on it as well, because I'm just literally before we talked, I started watching it again. I thought there must be. They can't go through the entire episode and let that go, but I think you're just like they're just holding on to the fact that you're so deep into the thrill of that episode that you're not even going to question why this whole thing started in the first place. It's
like they could, and it could have been easily amended, that plot hole, by just saying that the girls made those marks manually as a red herring, or you know what I mean? Like, I mean, or they just didn't need to be there whatsoever.
Yeah, it could have just been on the swing, couldn't it?
The other plot hole was when they were at the rest stop, and then they went there at nighttime, right? They're driving in the car at nighttime, and they go to the rest stop, and there's the whole bathroom and soda scene. And then they're like, the girls run away in the truck stop, right? And they're like, go back in, and they say to the waitress, who wasn't sure if she was the jogger from the beginning, reusing an extra or not, or whether it was just a common hairdo. But they go to her, "Oh, did you see the twins?" And she's like, "Well, yeah, they got on a school bus." I'm like, why is a school bus at a rest stop in the middle of the night?
Sure.
What kind of field trip? What kind of field trip is this? My impression was it was like midnight or 11 p.m. or something, and then they just ran onto a school bus of children. Like, why are those children up and at a truck stop? Like, this is is definitely some convenient things that happen.
Yeah, they picked those girls well actually because they sort of sold it, and the cast sell it so well. And we've got in this one Harriet Harris, who plays the sort of evil Eve, the older Eve, who's trying to get all the Eve children together, and she's fantastic. And I was trying to remember what I'd seen her, and
she's really good. And the Eve, the grown up, was so well cast against the children. They did look like they could have grown up to look like her.
She was. She's in. I've just had a look. She's in Memento, and she's in Addams Family Values as well.
I mean, what did you think of her Hannibal Lecter teeth chatter in the? That really made me laugh when she was in the asylum. Like whenever in the 90s, there was always someone in an asylum. And they were always just like had an extremely high IQ, and you'd go and visit them, and they'd just like, and she like, I just thought it was really, again, this whole episode being so economical and just every scene giving crucial info, like rapid fire. It's like, oh, let's go to the asylum, and she's like, so here's everything you need to know. Like just instantly. She
sat in the dark.
Like, oh, what plot would you like me to fill? Because I'm happy to do so. Anything you need to know, I've just got it ready. And I'll just throw in a teeth chatter to remind you I'm a psychopath.
Yes, absolutely love that. I mean, also another thing that's I always think is do, and I should look this up, but do the FBI get to tell the police what to do? And I don't think they do,
I mean, they're definitely on the hierarchy. They're definitely higher.
Yeah, but I don't know if they have a kind of jurisdiction to be able to come in to a live crime scene and start ordering people about. I think that's a kind of film thing.
Are you referring to the part where Mulder and Scully are at the scene?
Yeah.
And the police is like, they're like, we'll take these twins. The police are like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so who are you?
I'm like, as if, like, they're just like, yeah, sure, whatever. It's like, oh, these children were just involved in a heinous crime. You want to take them somewhere? Sure. I was like, surely they'd be like, no, you have to wait for social services and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, that was quite funny. And also, I was laughing because of the infamous dynamic of Mulder and Scully, where it's kind of like the will they, won't they, not just romantically, but will they, won't they believe in aliens? Like that old will they, won't they? Because of that, that infamous dynamic, it's just so funny when that dynamic happens because, the scene that made me laugh is Scully was like, they met the girl, the child Eve 1 or whatever, or 9, child Eve 9. They met her that evening, and then she was stolen from the children's home that night. Yeah. And then the next morning, it shows Mulder and Scully strolling to the car, and Scully's like, hey, you know that girl we met last night? She was brutally kidnapped in the night. And like just so casually. And like isn't that crazy? You wouldn't believe it. Yeah. And then Mulder's like I feel like he sassily looks up to the sky and is like, she was kidnapped by someone or something.
Yeah, well, something.
And I was like, that is so callous of him to be like sassily referencing aliens at a time like this when a child was just stolen who they met last night. It seemingly had no emotional response to them being like
he's always got some quip.
Like he came across as a bit of a psychopath in that moment, which I thought was really funny. It really made me laugh when they go to California and they're looking at they go all the way there to seemingly just look at an empty swing set, and they're talking about how the second father has been killed, and they're like, these murders happened at the precise same time.
Right.
And Scully's like, 2 serial killers? And then he goes, serial killers tend to work alone, not in pairs. And if they do, together, not in tandem. And then I was like, I just had this whole spin-off tangent in my mind, just envisioning 2 serial killers, like, met on a forum. And all the logistics they have to figure out over Zoom calls of like when They're going to do
Yeah.
like, making their whole logistical schedule for their tandem kills and like
Yeah.
just the
Is it
amount.
Pacific time? Is it
Yeah,
Eastern
yeah.
time? Oh
The
no.
amount of admin it would take to be tandem serial killers really tickled me, and I was like, there is a spin-off show there.
Yeah, definitely. 3, 2, 1, and
Yeah.
insert the knife. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's see that happening. Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I mean, do you think has it created a newfound love of the X Files? Do you think
Oh,
you're
I
going to watch
think
some
I
more?
would.
Do you
I
think?
think I would like to watch more. It was just because a few years ago, when the recent season of Twin Peaks
Yeah.
came out, I rewatched all of Twin Peaks with my friends Gemma
Right.
and Leon, and we just were like, oh, it's so soothing to watch something so nostalgic,
Yes. Yeah.
and so I was like, this would be another one that would just, and it's so, like I said, it's so quick and economical. It's just, so it's like I could see myself like just watching one every night before bed, like just a nice
Totally. Yeah.
nostalgic watch that, and it's not, something you have to be. I like things where every episode wraps up in and of itself,
Yeah.
and I don't have to try to keep. I don't know, especially as a parent, I'm like, I don't need to be keeping hold of threads in my mind for the next episode.
Yeah, I think you could get through this without even engaging with the alien stuff because that is the most irritating stuff in the X Files. It's like, oh, what's happening with the aliens?
You're like, I
What have they
like
done
the X
now?
Files, but those aliens, annoying.
There we go. Well, that's
Oh,
good.
and did you tell your listeners that we used to be flatmates and that's how we met? Because when we were flatmates, I believe it was you, Chris, who introduced me to The Room with Tommy Wiseau, because I hadn't heard of it, and I just
Right.
I watched it, and became so obsessed with it. I think at a certain point, I even played an 8-bit video game you found of it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm so glad you remembered that
yeah.
because I yeah, so we used to live in just off Brick Lane in a flat there, which is quite very close to a Chinese restaurant that used to do karaoke at 3 in the
Oh,
morning.
yes, I forgot
Um,
about that. Well, wasn't it underneath us?
yeah, and my entire room was painted red, and so it was kind of oppressive. I remember, but I never really did anything to change it up. I was just like, well, this is the hand I've been given.
I'm sorry, because
But
I'm the one who painted it red.
oh, did you?
Because
It's all coming out now.
your room used to be my room, and I was like,
Hmm.
what color should I paint my room? Because it was the whole flat. It was such a cheap flat. Like the rent was so cheap, and it was the
Yeah,
bedrooms were ginormous. These
yeah,
ginormous bedrooms, and in this flat on Brick Lane that was just like 3 floors with one bedroom like on each floor. And then
yeah.
it was such cheap rent, and it was an old flat that it hadn't been tended to since the 80s or 90s. But when I moved in, the flat, like the walls in the bedrooms were like magnolia, but with water stains, so it really looked like cigarette
Right.
paper. Like it really was like
Yeah,
being
yeah,
rolled inside a used cigarette. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go paint this room. And then I went to the
yeah,
paint shop across the street and was like, what color? And then I was like, oh, what about just red? and then I
yeah, yeah.
and then I was like, oh, this is gonna be amazing. And then it's like, I mean, you don't often see people painting a room red. I think I thought that it was gonna be so cozy.
Yeah, I think yeah. Also, you had a lot of stuff, so it looked good, But
Yeah.
I classically had like nothing. I just had like my clothes, and that was it. Just like one bed in the corner. But and then I remember there was like a black mold started to appear on the wall,
Oh dear,
almost
yeah.
sort of started to grow like a convulse in the corner. But
I think you answered we put an ad on Gumtree when we needed a flatmate that said red room on Brick Lane.
oh well, it's glutton for punishment, then, isn't it? I knew exactly what I was getting into.
You answered it and didn't end up in a bathtub with your kidneys taken out, which is a real win for Gumtree, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think about that time so fondly. It was
Yeah, it
like
was
it's
so fun.
such a fun
I
time.
think that flat is professional Airbnbs now, where each,
Is
because those
it?
bedrooms were so big, those
Yeah.
bedrooms were huge. Like I remember having like a bed and a couch in my room plus room. So I
Yeah,
think what
yeah.
they've done is they've made each one like refurbed, and then there's a code on the door, and it's a professional Airbnb after we left.
Right,
Because they got
right, of
rid of us by
course.
like quadrupling the rent, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it all went downhill. There used, what was that place across? Was it called Noodle King or
Oh yes,
something?
Noodle
There used
King.
to
Yeah.
be, and you could eat in there for like £3,
Yeah.
and it was like so good.
Yes.
But when that went, I was like, well, that is a sign of that is a death knell for this
The
area of
king is
East London.
dead.
Yeah, the king's
The
gone. We've got to
king
go.
is dead. It's a new
Yeah,
age.
but it was funny you got the yeah, because I got the DVD of the room from someone I used to work with, a comic book artist when I was working at Titan Books, and I never heard about it. And he was like, he's almost passing it around like a kind of video nasty, you know. So he's like, have a look at this; it's going to change your life. And you put it on, and you cannot believe what you're
Oh,
watching.
so
And
pleasing, so fun.
really mind blowing stuff, and I'm glad. I always he pops up, doesn't he? Tommy Wiseau occasionally. He's back in London to show the film for about the 50th time, and I think the last thing he'd done was like his version of Sharknado or something,
Oh
or like a big
dear.
shark film, and you can imagine what the effects are like in it. So
It
yeah,
saddens
you
me.
get
It
to see
saddens
that.
me when he tries to pretend it was intentional. I know it wasn't.
Yeah,
I know it wasn't
yeah,
intentional, and I think he's been advised to lean into that. So it seems like he
yeah.
masterminded the whole thing, but I don't believe it, nor do I want it to be true. I want it to be made with the purest of filmmaking intention.
Believe Me is written and edited by me, Chris Boyd, with production support from Steve Marshall. The music is by Johnny Boyle, and our logo is by Russ Brown. See you out there next time.